Frontline Chat with Harry Tangye and Dave Wardell.
Hey, that's the guy we've got coming on later. So welcome. How are you? Last cup of tea there?
Yeah, cup of coffee in my. It's not RIP. It's retired police dog dad coffee cup.
I'm sure it says RPO, mate. You were done RPO. No, I said that last time. Good to speak to you, mate. How are you?
I'm all right, mate. Yeah, we've just sorry we weren't here. Am I not freezing? Am I?
No, you're okay.
Sorry we weren't here last week. It was, I think we were still on the road. Can't remember where we were last Saturday. Were we somewhere between Sheffield and Wakefield? I think last Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, on our boys tour that Gemma was allowed to come along. So you can see that Finn is super relaxed after his holiday down there.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yes. So we
could have tidied up after him.
No, look,
pineapple and
yeah, seriously.
You look, is that a small child you used to have? That bone on the bottom left?
Yeah, he loves children. Yeah. He just couldn't eat a whole one.
Yeah, okay. Good, mate. No, I mean, I've been loving it. I must admit, I've been loving it in Newquay. Everyone's coming on. Hello, Rose. How are you? I mean, I'll show you. I don't know. The camera. I am at my mother's house, as you may have told. So there we go. Look, I've just mown her lawn. It's all very pretty out there, isn't it?
Absolutely, especially this time of year in the weather. It's beautiful down there.
That's the sea and stuff like that. Hey?
Don't show her smalls on the washing line.
No, exactly. Well, you know, I could. And this is so. It's not my decor, but I actually quite like it. It's fine. It's salmon. Huh?
It does suit you, buddy. That pinky.
I think she's got quite good Wi-Fi. Actually, it's good. It's got. So yeah, no, we're good. We're good. And I just had a lovely walk into Newquay with Ollie Taylor. So that was good. An old friend of mine as well. And we're going out tonight, Saturday, for a couple of old man pints. You know, we're not staying out for too long.
No.
Yeah, you just start a bit earlier, end a little bit earlier, and then you've got your day the next day. Yeah, no, nothing silly. I can't be bothered with all. I don't like getting ill, mate. I don't like it. But
that's not what you said a few weeks ago when you went out with our friend in Devon.
Yes, yeah, Ian. Well, he is a bad influence, and so I know now not to do it again. But I did say that last time. So again, took the motorbikes around Cornwall. That's what I did with Ollie Taylor, who's a police biker. So, and to be honest, you know what? People say, oh, you know, you're going to be ranting around the road. No, you don't need to. To be honest, most of the lanes, it's all about getting that lovely sweeping bends, just perfect. And most of them, I tell you what, 60 mile an hour, you wouldn't get too much more out of those bends anyway. So it isn't a speeding issue. And it tends to kill people, like some of the tourists find out, unfortunately. So
nice time of year to go out, though. Not, you know, low season. So not so much traffic around. Yeah, lovely.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. I put that one on by mistake as well. Ian, Ian Adamsey, he's the bad influence. Very good friend of mine up in the Bay Area. So good man, very helpful with police officers as well.
No, I owe him a book, actually. I managed to escape you and Ian because that's it. People haven't seen us since we did Paynton, and we were supposed to go out for a drink. I'm really sorry, and we will make it up to you and go out for a drink. But we decided to shoot off to Wheels straight after the show in Paynton, didn't we? But what a show that was brilliant.
You flatter yourself, as my dad once said to a late employee of his in the hotel about 50 years ago. He said, "You flatter yourself, my dear boy, if you think you were even missed." So what have you done? Because you went up to Scotland and you did some stuff, didn't you?
Well, yeah, I mean the whole tour itself. I mean, I put the stats up the other day: 1,800 miles, 16 beaches. We did the show in Paynton, and then we went up to Scotland to do to launch a project with the Scottish SPCA, the Scottish Society for the Protection of Cruelty to Animals. A wonderful charity. It's a Scottish version of the RSPCA. I think they're getting ready to celebrate their 200th birthday, so they've been around for quite a while. Incredible people, very supportive. They helped us with Finn's Law Scotland. And we got together with them last year sometime and said, why don't we do something sort of legacy wise for Finn and for school children, secondary and primary school children, talking about the human animal bond, because obviously that's what mine and Finn's story is all about, which is, look over my shoulder there. Look, Finn,
Yeah. Did you write a book, did you? All right.
Yeah, it was a bestseller. Did you not know? And so yes, what that meant was yesterday we spoke to 5,000 children in Scotland about the human animal bond. So yeah, what an incredible experience, and hopefully we've inspired those children to go on and think differently about children, perhaps take on a job working with animals or helping rescues and that sort of things. That was
and I think because particularly important, because like you said in your book, it was one of the things thing that got you into the police and for the dog unit, but it was something that really marked me, was the fact that you said it was that real first time you felt that bond, because you had a troubled childhood, didn't you? You had issues, there were problems in your family and your and then it was that first time, that first feeling when you walked this animal and you felt that bond, and that you knew that animal had returned that loyalty and that love sort of thing.
Exactly that. I still find humans complicated, but when I was a child, humans were quite complicated, and my mum struggled with her mental health. And but I was born into a house with a German Shepherd, and all my neighbours had dogs, and they were mostly German Shepherds. And to escape my mum's issues, I would take all the dogs for a walk and earn a little bit of pocket money. And yeah, the Blue across the road, I'll never forget him. He was about 48 kilos, a huge, great German Shepherd. And I could get him to do whatever I wanted to do with, a treat and a bit of fuss. And that's when, things really changed for me, and animals were absolutely fantastic. Yeah, we met the children who helped us with Finn's Law in Wales. Yeah. We've grown up a little bit now because it was a few years ago, but we met them at school in Wales as well.
And what I like about it as well is, because if you look at that website that I put on there, this one here, it does break it up into primary. So anyone involved in education, it breaks it up. So there's a video where the kids can actually watch together and then discuss afterwards, I imagine, of you. And it's one's directed very much. I listened to the secondary school because I thought I was a little bit older kid, but the primary one, I presume is just based similar, but based at younger audience. And I love the way actually it then gives opportunities for people who are looking for jobs and things to do. I did a job that I enjoyed doing. You did a job that you enjoyed doing. John Sutherland did a job that he enjoyed doing, and now I presume he's doing his job he's enjoying. But there's a lot of people out there who are doing jobs they do not enjoy doing, but they feel trapped. They feel they don't have an option. Yeah. And yet, if you work with animals, you get far more likelihood that you will enjoy your job, basically, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I work with some incredible animals, and there are a couple of humans in there that are okay as well. But the humans, the animals. I wish handlers could bring their dogs on a Monday and pick them up on a Thursday. That would make my job even better. But you're right there, Ian. If we can engage with young children rather than trying to teach them or correct them when they're a bit older, if we get in there when they're nice and young and teach them then they've got a nice solid grounding about it. And it's about all sorts of things, about understanding the needs of animals and other people, and the comfort that animals can bring us as well. So very proud of what we've done.
Great. Okay, I think it's time to bring on John Sutherland. We need to squeeze every bit of time we can out for him because he's done so much. John Sutherland, the police commander on on Twitter. I met him for the first time at the 2016 Twitter Awards, and we sat on the same table. And I met his family, and his family were. It was like they were out of some modelling catalogue. And John's he's not too tardy around the edges himself, is he? And so I was thinking, so I averaged the attractiveness down on his table. And we were up for the same awards, and we'll discuss that in a minute. But he joined the Met in 1992, I believe, which I joined in 1990. And obviously, he left it, I think, a couple of years ago, or 2018. But he's written 3 books. I will discuss that in a minute. He's written 3 books. Blue, which was Sunday Times bestseller. Crossing the Line, BBC Radio 4 was awarded awards, and the Siege is coming up. And everyone out there, he's offering a pre-production, I think that's the right terminology, but there's a book coming out that we can win today. So of The Siege, which is by Orion Fiction, out in June 2022. You can get that one first. I tell you what, I saw a message about John, a review from somebody who was on a thread somewhere, and part of what he said summed him up, I think. It said, "I love how you lend a law enforcement officer's perspective to real-world issues and do so with a high level of thoughtfulness." And I think that is right, isn't it? That's pretty much John. John, welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Lovely to join the grey-haired, middle-aged old men's club.
Yeah, none of you have got grey hair around here, though. It's just me and Finn. Lovely to have you, John. I met the first time I met you was the same event that that Harry. I mean, somehow Harry won. Goodness knows. I don't think anybody knows how Harry won that. And I met your lovely dog. Yeah, it was. I met your lovely dog as well as your beautiful family. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your career for the people who don't know you, and there can't be many people that don't know you, because if you don't follow John's account on social media, you really need to. Gives you an honest perspective of policing and what's going on. Tell us a little bit about your career, John.
Well, what do you want to know? I'm a husband to 1. I'm a dad to 3. I'm a resident of South London. And I joined the Met, as Harry says, in 1992. So I'm due to have my 30 in this September. But for reasons we may well come on to, I departed a little bit early. But over the 25 and a bit years that I was in the Met, I served all over London in a variety of ranks and roles, but mostly uniform. I need to confess to having been a rubbish detective, frankly. Yes, that's me. A pair of exceedingly large ears. And
we'll have to look at those again. Yes.
My old flatmate used to call me the FA Cup. And he would approach me from behind, and he'd grab me by both of the ears and try and lift me up in the air.
Oh, lovely.
That's bullying today, Dave. It wouldn't be loud now. It's character building then.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's made me the man I am today.
Yes.
But I ended up as a chief superintendent. My last operational job was as the borough commander of Southwark in South London, which I absolutely loved. I was a hostage negotiator. I was a football match commander at Arsenal and Chelsea and various other places. And I loved the job with every single bit of my heart and soul.
And Southwark, obviously, as most London boroughs, was very busy, wasn't it? You saw an awful lot of things and experienced an awful lot of life-changing events during your time in the Met, didn't you? If you had to think back, what was one of the most biggest memories of your career?
I mean, we could sit here for the next 3 days, and between us, we'd never stop talking. I mean, there are so many stories to tell, and I often talk about the painful privilege of policing, because policing, as you both know, and it happens in the hurting places. It happens at the scenes of crimes and car crashes and cot deaths and every other kind of catastrophe, and it's immensely painful. But the privilege is to be in a position to try to do something good on the days when something terrible has happened. but there are also days when everything goes horribly right as well. I mean, I could give you so many examples in answer to your question, but one sticks out. I wrote a chapter about it in Blue, the first book you mentioned. The day after, the front page of the Daily Telegraph called it "The Siege of London," which was a slightly dramatic title to give it, but in the middle of it at the time, it felt a bit like that. It was early 2012, so just before the Olympic Games. And I was, before I went to Southwark, I was the borough commander in Camden in North London. And call came in to say that there was a fire at an office block on Tottenham Court Road, which, as many people will know, is sort of on the edge of the West End, on a really busy part of the heart of London. And I was on call that week. So I had the radio on, I was listening to it, and fire, okay. And about 2 minutes later, a call came out to the same location saying that an armed man had taken hostages. And I thought at that point, I probably ought to attend. And over the course of the next 4, 5, 6 hours, whatever it was, we dealt with a massive armed siege that brought central London to a standstill. And a man dressed in what appeared to be a suicide vest, carrying a functioning flamethrower, would you believe, had gone into an office block and taken 20 plus people hostage, including a pregnant woman. And because I was the borough commander and because I was on call that week, and for no other reason, I ended up in charge of the whole thing. And it was the most extraordinary experience. I mean, half the Met turned up, and the whole thing was being broadcast live on the rolling news channels, and all the armchair critics dissecting what we were doing in real time. But it was just one of those days where the job worked. And I'll be honest, I stood in the middle of all of it, and half the time I didn't have a clue what was going on, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. But I was surrounded by this extraordinary team of women and men, ARV officers, traffic officers, TSG officers, local officers and PCSOs. The bomb squad were there, the hostage unit turned up, and everybody did their job magnificently.
So you have, as a negotiator, and I've worked with negotiators and on quite a large number of occasions, and completely in all of them, because you're constantly juggling with, okay, what's the best way to go now? But not only are you dealing with the individual in front of you, you're dealing with the information that's coming in behind. That's being fed back to see if it can be of use, and basically, because the priority is to bring the thing to a safe conclusion first and foremost, isn't it? Can you explain that negotiator? So, because you had a couple, I think, of quite high profile ones, didn't you? And some that probably hurt you quite a lot were occasionally it didn't work for some reason. Somebody ended up taking their own life. And when you've taken that you've had that bond with someone, I've had it at the road traffic collision where you get that bond with someone, you can see their last moment sort of thing. It's slightly different, but how did you cope with that? And were you able to cope with that? And maybe just explain a little bit about the role of negotiator, what you can actually, so people get a good idea, because all they have is TV version, really.
Well, I mean, the reality is whether as a negotiator or a traffic officer or a dog handler, and every other frontline role in policing, and there will be times and there will be places, there will be people, there will be faces that you never forget, that you carry with you for the rest of your days. And absolutely, that's true of my experience as a negotiator. But of all of the privileges of policing, negotiation was one of the greatest privileges of all, because most of the time, the kind of conventional, the scenario I described in Tottenham Court Road, which was resolved peacefully and nobody was hurt, thank God. That kind of Hollywood hostage scenario is actually pretty rare. The full title of the role is hostage and crisis negotiator.
Right.
And most of the time, what you're called out to deal with is people in crisis.
Yeah.
Poor lost souls on the worst day of their lives, and you're there to try and offer them a helping hand. And it is an extraordinary privilege, but places a strain on you. I mean, I was perhaps very fortunate. I only ever had one that went bad on me, but lots that were touch and go. In fact, one of the ones I found most stressful of all was one where actually we got him down and it was okay in the end. But for a long time, I wasn't sure whether we were going to be able to.
Right.
Standing on a window ledge about that wide, 17 floors up on a block of flats. And it was just me and him. And for a long time, I wasn't sure. And that was, gosh, a decade or more ago, probably. But it still lives with me now. But the job of a negotiator in those sorts of situations is actually incredibly simple. So best summed up really for me by a friend of mine, also now retired, a guy called Phil Williams. He used to be head of the hostage unit in the Met. Absolutely brilliant bloke, and remains a friend now. And he used to be one of the negotiator coordinators. So he would be the team leader for us, and it would be his decision whether or not to call out and deploy a team. And he had this affectation when he was the coordinator and you were on his list. If he needed to call you out, he'd ring you, and you'd see his number come up on your phone, and you'd connect the call, and there'd be no hello, no hi John, no how are you, no personal introductions at all. The voice at the other end of the line would just say, "Are you ready to save a life?"
Oh wow!
And it had an extra, gosh, I get the hairs on even now. It had an extraordinary effect. It was a remarkable way actually of focusing the mind on what really matters.
Yeah.
Harry, you were talking earlier about, as a negotiator, everything that's going on around you. And I guess I liken it a little bit to, I mean, I've never been much of an athlete, but I liken it a little bit to a 100-meter sprinter at the start of a race. And they're surrounded by the cacophony of the crowd, and they've got but something happens, and the whole world just narrows in. There's a track in front of you and the tape at the end. And I guess my experience of negotiating done well is that just the whole world narrows into. Now
the personal and emotional input you have to put. I mean, obviously I've seen negotiators. In fact, we used to joke that we needed to get the job done before someone considered ringing negotiators, because the whole job takes significantly longer once the negotiators this team of people turn out who you haven't seen in years, and they really do get emotionally, or it feels like it anyway when you watch them, get emotionally involved with that person. That must take its toll.
Well,
I mean, maybe
you've got to show empathy, haven't you? You've got to show empathy with the person, so there's a sort of connection, because they've got very genuine reasons for being there. And stealing your question, your suggestion actually, and Maria's asking about the press. We must answer that, about what we think about the intrusion and that sort of live footage now, which could be a problem. But yeah, sometimes, I mean, I remember being once on a bridge, and I wasn't a trained negotiator, and I'm thinking, I don't have to say. I mean, I genuinely was thinking, my God, I'd be bloody up there if everything had gone wrong for this man, and there was no initial sight of future, and the only thing you could say was, it will get better. And
it's negotiating is about more than policing. It's about more than law enforcement. It's about humanity. It's about being human. And empathy is one of the most important words of all in the life of a negotiator. My ability to make a connection with you, because if I can display genuine empathy, and if you are on the receiving end of that, it's possible for us to begin to build a relationship of trust with one another. And if you grow to trust me, it may be then that I'm able to suggest an alternative way out of this situation. But it's, every single case is different. And some of the stories are utterly heartbreaking. I mean, I dealt years and years and years ago with a man who must have been about 80 years old, and he was living in an old folks' home. And we know that loneliness is a huge issue for so many people in the country, but particularly for so many older people. and this old boy had fallen in love with one of the other residents, and she spurned his advances, and he was utterly heartbroken. And I was shown into the kind of the residence lounge of this place, not unlike the room you're sitting in now, Harry. But this old boy was sitting in an armchair, and he had a huge, great kitchen knife held to his neck. And you think, oh my goodness, where to begin?
After all those years, this is the worst that he. Yeah, I need to ask that because I've got to move on because there's so much to bring in. And but Maria did ask about the press and about this live footage. It's not necessarily press; it's the media, but it's also social media. It's on there all the time, and of course that can be really detrimental if they're watching the TV themselves or looking at the computers and YouTube themselves, seeing themselves. It is just a major problem.
I mean, to answer the question sort of briefly, it can be profoundly unhelpful. And you know, Maria mentions in her question that's just come back up about the Twin Towers. One of the things about film footage, of course, is that after the event, it can be incredibly re-traumatizing for people who've been a part of it. So you've lived through and hopefully, God willing, survived whatever today's crisis has been. But the fact that this footage remains sort of in perpetuity, if that's the right word, you know, it can have a remarkable re-traumatizing effect on people. So, you know, particularly in the context that Maria is asking, for the most part, the media can be incredibly unhelpful. If I'm honest. I understand that they've got to do, but I also feel sometimes that the boundaries are overstepped.
And there was instances where young men in particular have been murdered. I know Kojo was one, and Ben that you mentioned, I think, of really having an impact. And why did those sorts of cases affect you so much? Because you must have dealt with so many murders and things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I talk about, you know, the faces and the places that you never forget over the course of a policing career. And definitely Kojo and Ben and two other lads, Milad and Dogan, 4 young men. There's a picture of Kojo. He was 15 years old when he was murdered. That's Ben Kinsella, who was also 15, I think. You know, 4 young men in 4 different parts of London who were murdered at knife point in places where I was supposed to be in charge. And I don't know whether it's, well, at the time it was before I was a dad. I'd done bits and pieces of youth work earlier in my life. I don't know, I've always just cared about London's young people. And I was a London teenager myself once upon a time. And I remember the day that Kojo was murdered, and he was a complete innocent, just wrong place, wrong time. I'm still not entirely sure what the motivation for his killing was, other than some fleeting, indistinct notion of respect. He was hunted down in the street by a pack of young people in broad daylight in a pretty middle-class neighborhood where this sort of thing never happens. And I remember it happening. And then I remember about a week later, I was the neighborhood policing chief inspector for the borough where it happened. I remember about a week later being at the scene, and we'd closed off the road so that his family and friends could come and pay their respects at the scene. And a huge kind of memorial had built up at the point where he died. There was graffiti all over the walls and the pavements. I mean, beautiful graffiti, and flowers and cuddly toys and written messages. And I remember his family coming, and they were part of a church community. And I remember them all standing together, and I was sort of, I don't know, 30, 40 yards away at a respectful distance, just on the cordon, and hearing them begin to wail and hearing them begin to sing. And it was one of the most powerful, beautiful, agonizing things I'd ever heard. And I remember I went from, my next posting after there was Islington in North London, and I was the operations superintendent when Ben Kinsella was murdered. And it was a case that attracted a huge amount of media attention because his older sister Brooke had been in EastEnders for 2 or 3 years. And about 2 or 3, that's Ben, another complete innocent. He was out with his friends celebrating the end of his GCSEs. You know, like Kojo, I never had the privilege of meeting him, but I've met and remain in touch with his family. They're just beautiful, beautiful people. But I remember at the Nick, we hosted a press conference about 2 or 3 days after the murder to apart from anything else, make a witness appeal. And Brooke came with her dad, and somebody put them in my office to wait. And I came, and I remember sitting with them. It was just the three of us. And I mean, what do you even begin to say to your family in those circumstances? I was fumbling for words, but the two things I remember saying to his dad, the first thing was just, no dad should ever have to bury his son. And I'm so deeply sorry. But the other thing was to say, I promise that I will do everything within my power to make sure no one.
That's the key thing. So
and of course
that's the key thing, to offer some sort of closure, to know that people gave a shit, basically, and they did all they could to do, and it wasn't just another statistic. That's the most important thing, isn't it? Jill's asked a good question there. So should you, and I know, because there's some sort of links, you're talking about domestic violence and that side of things, which is very much linked and things. So are you able to give Jill?
So Jill's question about is there no answer to the epidemic of knife crime? And I mean, I've got a much more hopeful response, Jill. I think absolutely there is an answer. And you know, for those who want to dig a little bit deeper, I've written about it in both books, and there's some stuff on my blog page as well. But essentially, what London and the rest of the country needs is a long-term response to knife crime. I'm talking 20 years. That is based very much on what some people may have heard talked about as a public health approach, but recognizing that knife crime is a whole society problem that needs a whole society solution. So the answers to knife crime extend far beyond policing, and the first step towards solving it is to recognize that fact. We're all in it together.
Yeah, John, when you're talking about some of the incidents that you've been talking about there, you clearly recollect them, and it's almost as if you're back sat in your office with the Kinsellas, and clearly it's taken. I don't want to say taken its toll, but we know that this job does take its toll on all of us, or most of us. How do you come away from a job like that? What sort of support was there for you, and do you think that's got any better? And how do you deal with that now? Because it clearly still, these jobs still affect you.
We're covering the big questions, aren't we? Well, as you both know, and as some others may know, in the end, I had a nervous breakdown. I didn't, in the end, manage to carry it all. And this happened to me. I mean, my breakdown is almost 9 years ago now. I was medically retired from the Met 4 years ago as a consequence. And at the time, and in the years before, actually there was very little support within policing. You both know, I know, it was just a job, and we got on with it. And it's extraordinary, every day in one way, shape or form, we were dealing with mental health in the community. Mispers from secure units, people on motorway bridges, man in the street with a samurai sword. Every single day we were dealing with the realities of mental health in society, and even more so now. But back then, none of us ever talked about our own mental health. You just gave a shrug of the shoulders and you got on with it because that was the job. Yeah. So to answer the second part of your question, Dave, in the last sort of 7 or 8 years, it's got an awful lot better. I think there's a lot more support available now than there was when I broke. But I still think we've got quite a long way to go.
Did you find social media, because you've got a very big social media following, and I think because you were talking about the mental health side of things, I mean, because I think I read that your symptoms, you said, started in about 2013. That you realized, was there anything you were able to share with us when you thought, okay, there's an issue here? And did you find, the social media, but also then writing your book, especially in particular Blue, I imagine, That was that quite cathartic? Was that quite helpful?
So the second part of the question first, absolutely. In fact, I started writing as a form of therapy. It was only later on that it became the book Blue. And absolutely, that's been part of my journey and my mending process, which is incidentally a journey I'm still on. I mean, I'm a lot better now than I was 9 years ago, but it's, there's still a road to travel.
Yeah.
So yes, writing was enormously cathartic. I mean, in terms of signs and symptoms, I mean, one of the things I do these days is travel to forces around the country and talk about my story. And I talk about trying to understand the signs of mental ill health. And I point out to people actually that, my only understanding has come about with hindsight. Part of the reason why I got as ill as I did when I did is because I didn't understand what was going on at the time. But looking back, there were a whole series of signs and symptoms in my body, in my behavior, and in my brain. Those are the 3 Bs that I talk about. So I had recurring stomach trouble, which I'll spare you the details of, recurring lower back trouble, both of which I now understand are specific signs.
Very physical reactions then.
So yeah, very
don't
physical
necessarily know about. I wouldn't know. Okay.
And also just physically exhausted, way beyond the consequences of shift working and being on call and negotiating. I mean, proper physical exhaustion. So a whole series of physical symptoms. And then there were, in my case, quite subtle but behavioral changes. In the words of one of my colleagues, I'd started to get a bit grumpy. I started to become increasingly just overwhelmed by the little details of life. And then in the end, it was my brain that took over. So all sorts of kind of crippling levels of anxiety that ended up in full-blown depression. So I look back now and I see and I recognize and I understand that there were a whole series of signs and symptoms in my body, in my behavior, and in my brain. And if I'd properly understood them and recognized them and done something about them, I might still be serving now.
It's wonderful now that you're going around and trying to educate, and obviously your books, keep that in mind as well. Encouraging people to seek help before it's too late. Yeah, with like you said about the hindsight. But you were one of the first people really to talk about mental health in the job. Did you get any negativity from people within the job when you first started talking about that? Because it was very, I mean, you didn't go and seek help. You didn't go to occupational health and say, I'm not feeling it today, because back in the day, you were expected to be taken off your unit and perhaps not, told to go home away from all your colleagues, which is probably not necessarily the right thing for all of us. Did you get a bit of a backlash at all when you first started talking about it?
But the extraordinary thing is, no, in fact, quite the opposite. And one of the, the definitely the happier parts of my story is actually the reaction and the response that I got from people all around me, and indeed people's continued response now. I can honestly say, hand on my heart, I've never known or experienced anything other than people's complete support. And that's, in fact, one of the reasons why I was able to recover.
Yeah.
Excellent. I mean, that is... Now, the other big aspect in your life that you've made comment about really is the domestic violence issues, which we all know policing is hugely made up of mental health and domestic violence, and very much interlinked as well, of course. Yeah. The amount of time involved and the repercussions from that, destroying lives and so on and so forth, isn't it? And there was something you put on that I just thought I would add, and I don't know if people can see that at all on, you can't so much on my screen, but you actually said what is, or is probably not too clear on mine, but I'll see if I can bring it up on the actual screen, and then I can
see it pretty well.
You can you? That's good. Yeah. So so the experience has really shown you that things are present in Billy's lives. You've mentioned things like domestic violence, can you mention some of the things there, because I can't actually see those now on this screen?
Yeah, so this little drawing diagram, which I first put together years and years ago while I was still serving, it was my attempt to try to explain to people the reality and the complexity of knife crime in this instance, because we end up having these hugely binary, oversimplified conversations where, we end up having no conversation really other than one apart about stop and search, and that's a hugely polarized one, between those people who think stop and search is the answer to everything, and those people who think that it's the root of all evil. And it's very difficult to. But the point is, as I alluded to earlier, actually more enforcement isn't going to fix anything.
No.
That actually, if we're going to solve knife crime, then we need to understand what the underlying causes are. We need to understand why. And Billy's a completely fictional character. He's not a real person. He's a sort of an amalgam of so many of the young men that I dealt with over the course of my career. We need to properly understand why he would pick up a knife in the first place. And if I think about the cases that I dealt with, Kojo's, Ben's and others, and if I think of the suspects who were responsible for those murders, what we tried to do in the places where I was working was, alongside the investigative response to the murder, was actually try to develop a broader understanding of the backgrounds of the perpetrators. Because actually so often perpetrators are also victims. And there are a number of recurring factors in the backgrounds of so many knife crime suspects. But overwhelmingly, the most recurrent factor of all is the fact that these young men, grew up in homes where domestic violence was a reality. And I'm on record as saying, and I hold to it now, that domestic violence is the single greatest cause of harm in society. If any prime minister or home secretary was to come to me and say, John, on the basis of all your policing experience, is there one thing that we should concentrate on ahead of anything else? I would say without hesitation, domestic violence.
Yeah, very valid
and the
point.
Same,
looking down that list, well, you're just saying, looking down that list on the list that you made there, you can see how other organizations have a role to play. It isn't just the police. There's so many people, from community leaders to schools to families, that have got to take their role in trying to deal with this pain.
And yet so often, truth be told, when it comes to a problem like knife crime, we blame the police for the existence of the problem, and then we blame the police for their failure to fix the problem. And actually, in both cases, we're completely missing the point. Blaming the police for the existence of crime makes as much sense as blaming doctors for the existence of disease. It's just totally missing the point.
What would you do if you weren't in the police and you never joined the police, John?
What would I have done?
Yeah.
I didn't have a plan B. It's the only, honestly, truly, the only thing I ever want. So that I did have a slight unfulfilled hankering to be a pop star. Let's be honest.
Is that next?
In my teenage years, I did actually work for a band behind the scenes, and we did the Reading Festival and we did all sorts of things, and we had a lot of fun. But the only serious ambition I ever had was to join the police.
And did you have a relative in the job? Did you have a role model? Where did that just?
I'm a first generation copper.
Right.
Although, funny enough, I did discover a year or two ago that I think I had a great uncle on my dad's side. So the Sutherlands are originally Scottish. It's all gone by the time it got to me. But I think I had either a great uncle or a great great uncle who travelled down from Scotland about 100 years ago to join the Met and was sent home because he was too short. So maybe there was something in the gene pool, but I was the first one to actually make it.
So why a policing career then? What did you experience, or did it just look fun and fast, or was there a want? For me, it was brought up on a council estate and wanting to right a few wrongs. I don't mean that in a nasty way. I mean it was dealing with bullies. But so what was it for you?
I mean, I remember the first moment it occurred to me. I was 16 or 17 years old, standing on Hammersmith Broadway in West London, waiting for the bus to school, and seeing a PC walk down the other side of the road, doing nothing at all, paying no attention to me, knowing what I know now, probably just bored, cold, tired, and hungry, 2 or 3 hours into early turn, on his way into the Nick for breakfast. But I saw him walking down the road, and whilst I wouldn't want to give it the full kind of Damascus Road experience, something absolutely went click inside me. I looked at him, and there was some part of me that said, that's what I want to do with my life. And really it grew from there. And I guess it was a combination of, on the one hand, because, you know, I wouldn't want to give my 17-year-old self too much credit. You know, on the one hand, I think I was just looking for an adventure. But absolutely, I wanted to be part of something that matters.
Yeah.
And that's what it turned out to be.
And you gave 25 years of your life to it.
And it's those little victories, isn't it? I mean, Maria's saying here, basically, saying she's worked with young people, and it's just nothing better than getting the underachievers to actually achieve. And that's why I do a lot of Duke of Edinburgh Award, because you find when you take a group of students on the moors, and after a few days of maybe even horrible weather, the big well-known confident guys are there and they start to listen to the little guy, the little insignificant, the guy who hasn't developed quite as much as everyone else, and because they're really good at map reading, and so what do we do here? And so that really empowers them. You see that change. It's phenomenal. It's a bit like Maria was saying there. The police, I think, probably get just as much satisfaction from, you know, people say, what's the best job? I said, do you know what? The best job is going to those people who are frightened out of their wits because their car's broken down in a really dangerous position, and you get them out of that sticky situation. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But it's like you're that instant fix to calm everything down. And it's a job like no other. You saying about your negotiator and what you were going through, that is a job like no other, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But you know, again, going back to the list for Billy, you talk about role models. You know, Harry talked about the Duke of Edinburgh, and of course, hopefully, there's some children on there that will have been given an amazing opportunity, and they'll find a role model and a path out of whatever might be going on in their life if they come from that sort of background. But quite often for kids, there isn't that. I mean, I know we're very lucky where we live; it's lovely. But my wife's a local cop, and she does do her best to try and turn these children around when she starts to see it isn't just arresting them, it's making sure there's a follow-on support for them and their families, so that maybe, just maybe, they do get that role model that gets them and helps them, whether they know they're helping them or not, and supports them out of it. I remember several role models in my youth on Southeast London Council Estate where I was brought up, and they won't know that they were important in my life, but they were, and I saw a path out. And when I got to that crossroads, and I could have gone that way or I could have gone that way, for whatever reason, the stars lined up and I went that way. And it is important.
You're absolutely spot on. One of my great heroes is John Carnican, who's a retired DCS from Scotland, and he was one of the co-founders of the Violence Reduction Unit in Glasgow. And he's got a wonderful quote that I use and reuse often. He says, whatever the question, the answer is relationships. And absolutely, for all of us, but particularly for kind of vulnerable young kids in vulnerable situations, the thing that makes more of a difference than anything else is the presence of a stable, loving, nurturing relationship. Whether that's a police officer, and there's a lovely story I think about Muhammad Ali and his relationship with a police officer when he was younger. But whether it's a police officer, a youth worker, a school teacher, but those of us who are a little bit older and a little bit grayer and a little bit wrinklier, we have the extraordinary capacity just to offer our hand up to those who are younger and less fortunate than ourselves.
Absolutely.
What do you do now that is completely unimportant that you enjoy? Do you have it, or you work and no play, John?
No. I have to go a whole lot more slowly these days. So I go very gently. Like you two, I'm a dog owner. I walk puffing every day. That's key to my sanity.
Now, Did the children name that dog, or did you? Or did
It was a sort of combined effort. It was.
Oh, mate, you were forced into that, surely. Puffin.
No, I quite like Puffin. It's
Puffin was
Puffin a Rottweiler? Is Puffin a Rottweiler by any chance?
Meet Puffin. Puffin's lovely.
He's a working Cocker Spaniel, but we take our family holidays every year in Pembrokeshire, so it's partly a tribute to the seabirds of South Wales.
Oh, nice, interesting. Well, don't let me try to change your mind over it. Puffin is very different, but I did think it was one of those rules where you never let your children name your pets because you're the one shouting it in the garden.
No, I'm not having any of this cynicism from a man who owns a dog called Arthur, for crying out loud.
That's true. Well,
Puffin goes down very well in the park. What a wonderful name, most people say.
Puffin, followed by you should precede it with I say Puffin. No, that's good. No, you did actually say, going on the side of that, you did actually say, because a phrase that's very well known to the police is every contact leaves a trace, and we know that when we describe, aren't they? They treat basically, if we're dealing forensically, if you're a police officer and you're going to a scene, you touch something, but you're trying to, somebody else will pick that off you and take it, and so your marks goes on to them. It's all about DNA and that side of thing, forensics. But you sort of used it in another way, which I think was very relevant, and that was towards sort of the mental health side of things as well, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I'd go so far as to say that Locard's principle and its various applications is probably the most important thing I learned in 25 and a half years in policing. This idea that every contact leaves a trace, which you can apply in forensic terms. You can absolutely apply it to policing and a number of other professions as well. You know, the things that you come into contact with professionally leave their mark on you. But I also think just more broadly in terms of human relationships of every kind, you know, every time two people come into contact with one another, a trace is left. And that applies whether we're talking about people we've known for a lifetime or someone we've just met. But, you know, if you think about it, you bump into someone and you smile or you scowl, you encourage or you ignore, you hold out a hand of friendship or you withdraw it, you bless, curse, you love or you hate. But every contact leaves a trace. And particularly now in the world that we live in where, thank you, Kay, Puffin is a brilliant name. Harry can shut up.
Kay, you're banned. But anyway, go on.
The world we live in now, where for so many people the default means of communication is to stick our fingers in our ears and yell. Actually, the way that we treat one another is incredibly important. And it's a choice.
Yeah, it is. But you, the three of us live, well, not our whole lives, but part of our lives on a platform where it's very easy to hide behind a keyboard and criticize people and be nasty just for it feels like just for the sake of being nasty sometimes. So that could be a challenge as well, can't it?
Yeah, but it applies even on Twitter.
I mean, this was one on yours, I see. At last, they've scrammed the armchair generals, you know, and it is something, but it's always a line, isn't it, between, because I'm told sometimes by people, you need to listen to the other side. And I think, and I know I can be a little bit brash, a bit forward, and sort of snap it because I get frustrated. I think, well, as long as it's informed opinion, your opinion, how much does it count if it's not informed on anything? You know, but do we sort of play this role where we're sort of, right, okay, I pretend to listen to you, but you just have no idea what you're talking about?
The Armchair Generals cartoon came from the current edition of Private Eye, and I saw it, and it just reminded me of a lifetime in policing. Yes. And I think, yes, of course, it's so profoundly important to listen. But I also think sometimes we're in... Yeah, absolutely, Andy, especially on Twitter. I think sometimes as coppers or recently retired coppers, we lose a little bit of our professional confidence. You know, on an issue like knife crime or domestic violence or dog handling or firearms, actually, you know, we are entitled to have an opinion, and we are entitled to have our opinions be taken seriously because of our lived experience, our professional training, the limited amount of expertise that we may possess.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a false equivalence, isn't there, between the person who really knows what they're talking about and the person who hasn't got a clue. And sometimes we do need to give a little bit more weight and credibility to to the person who's actually walked the walk.
Yeah.
And on that point, if anybody doesn't follow, I said it at the beginning, if anybody doesn't follow John and doesn't read his blogs and haven't read his books, then you really do need to, because it will give you a completely different, and well, it was fresh when it came out, but it'll still be fresh for some people, a fresh view on what's going on out there. And John doesn't hold back. He's very honest, and he's very eloquent, much more eloquent than I could ever get it across. And I do encourage you all to have a look at John's social media and John's blogs. They are incredible.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just putting his there we go. We'll just add that one. Is that right? Have I got that right? It's not on there. Stand by. Add banner. All right, we'll talk amongst yourselves. There we go. Is that the right? That's the right one.
There you go. Yes, that is my Twitter.
For Twitter, that's good.
You'll also, if you put that in alongside WordPress in your search bar, that'll take you to the blogs as well.
So because there was a bit of a funny story on because in 2016 at the Twitter Awards, I was on your table, and I forget if you were on for other things, but I was up for the best sergeant's Twitter account and the best blog writer, and you were up for best blog writer, hugely higher ranking officer than I was. And I was, and when I won the best sergeant, and then thank you very much, came back, and then the best blog came up, and you won it. And when you came back, I just said, well, that saved the awkwardness, didn't it?
Actually, you give yourself too much credit, because when I was announced as the winner, you swore at me.
Yes, yeah.
As I went up to collect
not
the
even
award,
with respect, you.
As I went up to collect the award in front of my family, this voice hissed next to me, "You bastard!" And that was you.
I forget that. I forget that. So, what's the plan now, John? What are you up to now? So you've got exciting book coming out.
Well, I do have to live life a lot more slowly and gently these days, but I talk a bit and I write a bit, and I've now stumbled into fiction. And the first book is coming out on the 23rd of June, and there it is. And as I have in my hands here a preview copy of it, one of very few that exist in the world, but one of those following or listening or watching today would be very welcome to have it.
Brilliant. Can I just say, for YouTube at the moment, for we're just trying to encourage more people onto YouTube, that side of things, because for example, people follow on Twitter, but they can't interact with us, and it doesn't show in the figures. So Twitter, since they went away from Periscope, I think YouTube is a really good central base to keep these, and you can look at other versions, other podcasts we've done. So I'm going to say, Dave, if you agree, that if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, anyone from now in the next couple of days, then we will choose somebody to receive that book. I think 24 hours should just suffice, actually. Yeah, if you already subscribe, you don't often get told to unsubscribe, but if you already subscribe, just unsubscribe and subscribe again, and then you'll be in that list. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Thanks for that, John. Don't be surprised.
Everyone else can pre-order their copies. It's out on the 23rd of June.
And it's on Amazon, is that right?
And available from all good bookstores.
Brilliant. Are you having a launch party?
I think I might. I might invite you to.
Oh, right.
You see, Dave, well done. Dave, you pushed him into that one.
Oh, I did, didn't I?
Yeah, he shouldn't have
will
asked.
Once you press unlive this, he's about you two are not coming.
Yeah, let me make this very clear.
What you don't know is that it's one of the core principles of hostage negotiating, that negotiators never lie.
This is very true. Do you say that to your wife as well when she's like,
absolutely? Absolutely.
It is true, though. I remember that.
Yeah,
And that's the thing.
negotiators
People
never
think
lie.
never lie, because otherwise, the next time they turn up with someone, they'll say they won't take anything as credible. Wow. Look, I think that Angie has summed that up. Greet chat. Thank you. I don't know if it's meant to be greet Angie, but that'll do me. Angie, yeah, that's it. Of course, yeah.
Some people are just asking, Harry, if you go onto YouTube and look for and search for Frontline Chat, you'll see us, and you can subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button.
Yeah, Frontline Chat, and then you will get us. Go past all the cat flea stuff, the dog flea stuff, and go and just Frontline Chat, and just stick our names in, and that will get you there. No problem. Thank you so much indeed. You have been an absolute star. It has flown by again. We expected it would be, and it would do, and it has. John, it's been emotional. Thank you very much. And Dave, anything else to say, my friend? Or
no, have a wonderful week, everyone. Enjoy the weather. It's going to get chilly. John, thank you ever so much. And please give Puffin, which is an incredible name for a dog, a big cuddle from me and Finn.
I will do exactly that.
Thank you, John. Just stay on for a couple of seconds afterwards, and yeah, we'll just see out with Finn there. That's it.